Hello everyone, thank you for joining us today. Let me share my screen. And we are going to talk about how to build compare selected kind of application when you can select a few records, few items on different pages, and then display all of them side by side in a user-friendly manner. So it's a very simple application, and you can probably see lots of stuff like this. For instance, you can probably compare different cars on website like cars.com, edmunds.com. So I will show you a few ideas of how you can do something similar in your own application. Okay, let me show you what we have built here. We use a standard cars template that comes with PHP Runner and ASP.NET. We just added just probably one more table to implement this functionality. So that's the application. And let me log out. So every user has a different selection. So we need to enable login. So we can separate user 1 from user 2 selections. So let me show. That's a table. And we have just 9 cars here. We display 5 cars per page. Let me reset the selection and start from the very beginning. So this is a table that shows us selected records, no selected records at the moment. And when we click a checkbox, you can see that checkbox stays checked, and the background of the row changes. And compare selected button is still not enabled because we only have 1 record selected, and we need to select at least 2. And it can be a record on a different page. And here it is. Now we can click compare selected and see these 2 records. So what is interesting here is that selection can be made on different pages. If you click back to page 1, we will see that our record is still selected. We can select 1 more record, compare selected 3. And here our selected records stay selected. So that's raw data. It's just ID of the record, user ID, and record ID that points to cars table 2, 8, and 4. So it's all very simple. And when we click compare selected, it shows us a different page where you can see all the cars you have selected. And you can compare them side by side. Price, horsepower, or whatever kind of metrics you're looking for, you can display it here. And you can obviously, just a list page that is shows us the vertical in the vertical mode, and it can display up to 4 records because it doesn't look good otherwise. So this is how we implement it. So let's select 1 more car. Mazda 3, and if you try to select 1 more, it says you can only select up to 4 records. It's just because we are trying to build something that looks good, and if there will be selected too many of them, it will be difficult to display on a single page. So that you click compare selected, that's car number 4, and you could see it all here. You can compare prices and everything. So, and selected records, it now shows 4 records. And obviously, if I go back here, click reset selected, it will delete everything and updates status of the page. So we do not need to reload the page. So we're doing everything via AJAX. So there is no need to reload the page. So let me show you how it was implemented. So most of it is these are tables that come with the standard cars template, and there is one more table that we have added here, cars selected record. This is the page that we see. Oh, selected records is a view. Selected record is a custom view that is based on the tab of car selected records, which is the table that stores our selection. So we needed to do a join to based on record ID, car ID, whatever ID. We need to pull the actual description of a car from cars table. So we left join it with cars table. And these are our results. Okay, let's dig into the code. Let's take a look at that's our selected records. It's just a list of records we have selected. And this is the page that is shows us cars that we have selected. You can see that grid type is a vertical grid and records per row 4. We can choose a different amount of records. We can pick 6, but the number 4 that we do not allow the selection that was hard-coded, it's in the code. So it makes more sense if we display 4 records per row side by side. So just a regular vertical layout page, no changes here except for the modified the layout a little bit, moved some fields around. You can display more information here if you need to. Okay, just a regular list page. So what we need to do, we need to implement, first of all, there are a couple of buttons here. But before we look into these buttons, I want to show you the most interesting part of it. So how we assign a handler to this checkbox. So, you know, like by default, when you select the checkbox, nothing is happening, right? And what we want to happen, if we want to immediately insert the record into selected records table. We want to do it right away. We don't want the user to press any other buttons. And it is happening. So this is how we do it. So in unload event, of this page. Okay. I hope you can see it. And here we just see if we need to enable or disable our buttons here. We get from proxy object, we get count selected, and it's the initial number of selected records that we had before we hit this page. If you're coming from another page or we're coming from some other table, and we save it in a window.cnt variable. So when you do this, this kind of JavaScript syntax, window is like a global object. And if you use a syntax like this JavaScript variable will be available in all JavaScript events on this page until the page is reloaded, of course. So that's how you make it available to all JavaScript events. It's just useful to have it this way, so we can access it in buttons code, and we can just use it anywhere in JavaScript. What we check here, if we do not have any selected records at the moment, reset button will be disabled, which makes sense. Compare selected, we only enable it if count is 2 or more. So if count is below 2, either 0 or 1, we will make the button disabled. If count is 2 or more, button is already enabled, but what we need to do is we need to update buttons label. Now the interesting part. We now go through the list of all checkboxes. So this is our jQuery typical selector. What we're looking for all objects where name is selection with square brackets. Now we use jQuery's each function that will execute the following code for every checkbox that is a part of this collection. So what do we do here? So let me remind you, this is what is happening on the initial page load, right? So let me add a comment. So if property of this item is checked, is set to true, meaning that checkbox is there, the check mark. So we also change background to gray. So who knows what is the closest function does in jQuery? Does anyone use it? If you do not, let me tell you, is that it will find the closest tag, that is tr, closest to our current element, which in our case is a checkbox. So that's the idea. We do not specify specific ID in the code because we are looping through the whole collection right here. And for each of those elements, we call this function. So if checkbox is selected, change the background. That's what we're doing here. And now, probably the most interesting part. First of all, we need to check if the new state of the item is checked. So it is, if it is checked now, we increment the count in our global JavaScript variable, and the count is more than 4. So we do not allow more than 4 records here, right? So we decrease the count back to 4, actually. Okay, we uncheck our item and we display a pop-up saying that you can only select up to 4 records, right? It's right here. So if it wasn't above 4, greater than 4, what are we doing here? We're doing this again. We are changing it to enable. We do not need to check for the count of items to enable the reset button, because if it's even one record is selected, it needs to be enabled. Enable reset button. And if we have selected more than one record already, enable compare selected. If it was unchecked, we are changing background back to white and we decrease the count and we disable our buttons. And at the end, we make a post to the same page that we are on, cars_list. I believe that's the same post that will either add a new ID or remove it, depending on. So we pass in checked, if it was checked or unchecked, and the record ID. So we either adding it to the database or finding it there and deleting it. Make a AJAX post to the same page and update the selection. That's what we did. So we use a AJAX technique at the end of our code. And what is interesting, if we are checking or unchecking, doesn't really matter. we're doing that post in both cases. The only difference is that when we checking off our checkbox, it will be true. If we unchecking or clearing, it will be false. That's the difference. So let's see what kind of AJAX, what this AJAX post does and where we process it. So that's a list page before process event. Post value of A, that's our checked. So we can recognize this post request from other post requests, and we only execute our code if value of A in the post is checked. So we're getting the data of the current user, and if post value checked is true, we just in case we're checking if this record was selected already. In a normal situation, it's not required. We're just trying to play it safe, and we don't want to accidentally insert the same ID into selection tables twice. So we're checking it, and if the count is 0, then we do insert a new record into car selected records with our post values, which is record ID and ID of the current user, which is 3. That's our record. And if post value of checked was not true, which false, which means we unchecked the checkbox, then we try and delete that existing record. So that's pretty much straightforward.